Hello everyone. It has been a hot minute. And by a hot minute, I mean a hot month plus change. But I have a story to tell. So, this level, a lot has happened since the last time I played it, such as me playing other things to just have a more productive use of my time. But let's go in order. So we know the solution to this first riddle already. I'm going to bring up my paint tab real quick. Should be... I'll just leave it on the side there and make sure that... Alright, it doesn't seem like any of my windows are broken. Okay. So we already know this first one. Down, right, up, right, down, left, down, right, down. So this one. So shortly after I uploaded the last episode, someone who was watching along pointed out to me that when they tried the level, they noticed something different. And the different thing they noticed was that the starting orientation of these blocks here is actually different. Specifically, the overall pattern is the same. Like it's always the same base 4, addition, multiples of 3 sort of thing. But, sure enough, which orientation corresponds to 0 in base 4 is randomized. So that's why I had trouble with this riddle last time. Like, I had to, basically redo the solution from the ground up. But now that I know what's going on, it's a lot easier for me to figure it out. So I believe... What's my strategy for this part? Right, it's that this second one here can be read as 0, 1, 2. So I just take note of this is the 0, this is the 1, and this is the 2. So 0 is on the right. And now we input our numbers. So 2, 3, 1. So 0 is on the right. So 2, 3, 1. Then 3, 0, 0. That's alright. 3, 0, 3. 3, 1, 2. Which one? 3, 1, 2. Then 3, 2, 1. Then we have 3, 3, 0. And then the last one just goes up on its own. I think this is one of the better patterns you can get, since it involves barely any hitting the switches 3 times. And then we've got this section here. And I guess you already remember the third riddle. So I'm going to pause the game here. And I'll go into the level info, and I'll just bring up the screenshot that I took way back when. So this third riddle, I've given it a lot of glances since then. And one thing I did observe after it was pointed out to me that the second riddle was randomized in terms of orientation, I realized, what if that's true for the third riddle as well? And so I went and looked back at my old footage, and sure enough, the hints in the third riddle were constantly changing between every attempt. I wasn't quite sure of how they were changing, but at the very least, it seemed apparent to me that it wasn't just like a rotational sort of analog. Like, it wasn't the same thing that was going on with the second riddle. There were actual different patterns being generated every single time. And I decided that in order to try and figure out what was going on, let's bring out the paint window for real this time. Might take a while for it to, come on. Properties. There we go. Okay, so we've got our paint window out now. You'll notice that I've got a lot of weird stuff down here now. So, basically, let's go over what this stuff means first. So this was me basically doing 6 different test runs of the third riddle to see what patterns it gave me, and then I just wrote them all down. But of course the format here might seem a little bit strange. Specifically, there's 1 fewer elements here than in a, like, just sort of normal writing of the pattern here. And also, there's only 3 values here. And how I determined these 3 values was I would take the difference in rotation from one element in the string to the next. And I did read it all as like one giant continuous string instead of as a 2D shape. And I would just, if you needed a clockwise turn to get to the next one, then I would do a plus. If it was counterclockwise, then I'd do a minus. And if it was a flip, then I would do this little, I forget what this character is called. And I went and wrote them all down. And at some point I noticed that there were sort of symmetries here. Specifically, I think the best way to describe it is that the symmetries I noticed were basically the same as the ones I noticed here, just written in a different format. You can see that this and this, they sort of flip around this, and they also flip the sign. That's basically just another way of saying that, like, this overall string has a central symmetry. And then another for here, and then a much shorter symmetry around here. And then finally a bizarre sort of symmetry around here, which only goes for a single thing. And that pattern was consistent. There was some sort of bizarre stuff with how, around this point specifically, like sometimes the signs of the stuff on each side would change, but other times it wouldn't. So we've got a plus and a plus on the side of this plus here, but here we have a minus and a plus. Here we have a flip and a flip. Here we have another flip and a flip. Here we have a plus and a minus. And then here we have a minus and a minus. So suffice to say, I was mighty confused trying to figure out what that meant. And this was about as far as I got in terms of like solid new ideas. But even then, like, nothing jumped out at me as something that could help me actually solve this whole thing. You might be wondering what this shape is. And if I open up the game again real quick, you'll actually notice that that was me drawing that section of the level, which I just died to. And here's a fun fact about the level, the game engine rather, is that the camera scrolling kind of sucks when you're traveling a lot of screens at once. Seems like it takes a while to like actually follow where you are, and it has sort of a lag to it. Anyways, so this weird section of the level, which was completely inscrutable to me, I went in and wrote it down in the paint document because I wondered if perhaps it was supposed to be a hint of sorts for the third riddle. And I was like, well, the slope's outwards here, then you've got the weird split here, and then the slope's inwards here. Maybe this is supposed to be like some sort of interpretation as like this sort of set of instructions here, like a clockwise turn, a counterclockwise turn, and a flip, or a plus, a minus, and a flip. I never extrapolated anything out of this, so this is just here, I guess. And I looked at it a lot of times. I tried to figure it out a lot of times, but nothing ever happened. And then over here, you've got me just writing down another pattern, up, left, right, up, and noting the symmetries as always. Down here, you can see I was writing the in-between rotationals stuff, blanking on a good word to use. But in general, this particular pattern here maps onto this sequence of rotations here. So it seemed that there were specific ways in which the patterns could be laid out. Specifically, the first thing was that no two adjacent terms in the overall pattern were ever the same. Like, you'd never have an up and an up, for instance, or a left and a left, anything like that. So adjacent terms were always different. And the second was that in terms of just the rotations, it seemed that there were only a few preset ways that the rotations could start, and furthermore, separate, distinct patterns for the overall rotation of the hints for the third riddle. And I even noticed that somehow those 6 I noted down were all they were all inverses of each other. So we've got this one here, plus plus flip, and this one down here is a minus minus flip. Then we've got a flip plus plus, flip minus minus. Then here we got a flip minus minus, flip plus plus. And then this one and this one. You get the idea. So that was neat. And it led me down the rabbit hole of thinking, well, since this is what's going on, like, if I were to meta-analyze what it means that the level is generated this way, it has to do with symmetry, because, like, why else would you not want any of the alike symbols or any adjacent symbols to be alike if you wanted a puzzle about symmetry? Because if they were alike in a place where you didn't intend for them to be, then you could potentially establish a symmetry in the wrong places. So that was the first idea of sorts I had. Well, not the first idea. I had a lot of ideas. An idea. Let's call it an idea. But of course, even after thinking in terms of that sort of meta-knowledge, again, didn't really help me much. I went and re-verified some really simple, basic, nonsensical, but still somewhat sensical potential forms of solving this, such as redoing the thing I did last time, which I was extremely sure of, except with the knowledge that the layout was changing, I just sort of double made sure that I actually input the overall strategy correctly. And then another one I tried was, I think, taking this element here and basically doing a symmetry of the whole thing and using that to fill in the gaps. That didn't work either. Hold on. Let's go over here. So I'm going to start the riddle, and you'll notice the base 4 clock there. At some point I realized, well, what if the third riddle is actually a combination of all the past stuff in the level? Because it's got a base 4 clock, and it's got the, it seems to have a notion of symmetry, which was the case for the first riddle. And that also was sort of extra fodder to make me think that maybe this inscrutable shape that bridges the second and third riddles was actually important somehow. But again, even with that lead of sorts, if you could call it one, I never got anywhere. So let's go over here. So you'll notice the laser and the mirrors. I always wondered what was up with the mirrors, like why there were 3 of them. That was another thing I figured out pretty quickly after reviewing my footage of the last episode. And funnily enough, it was something that I had already tried in the episode. So the reason these mirrors are here, and they're laid out like this, is so that you cannot place all of your extra lives down and block the lasers, and thereby give yourself infinite time to solve the rest of the puzzle. So you can't just brute force stuff here and just let your batteries turn into glasses and block the lasers, so you can just go to the end whenever you want to. So that's why that's in place. One last thing I had checked before I went off the deep end was I went and made a pair of glasses. I waited out the full timer. I grabbed a pair of glasses. I backtracked through the earlier section of the level, and I just used the glasses to check to be absolutely sure that there were no hidden elements. Sure enough, there weren't. And now I think you're pretty much caught up with the state of the art now. Now, second part of this story was me just sort of posting around about it. There's 2 specific servers where I'm particularly active in discussion about this game. Both of them are private, but one of them is less private than the other one. I was just sort of like... I was basically just yelling into the void. Nobody who was listening in had any new insight to offer about this level. Potentially also that could have just been because I was asking late at night and nobody was around to answer. But after I got done with that, I decided to just take another look at the forums for Enigma. Because even though I can't post there because, again, I don't have an account. By the way, it's been a month and my account application email I sent still has not been addressed. I'm gonna remain patient, but let's not get sidetracked here. So I looked at the forums. There is a section on the forums for basically tips and tricks on every level. I looked, and sure enough, there was eventually a page talking about this specific level. And it was funny because it was a lot of different people posting about different parts of the level, including the first and the second riddle. And for the third riddle, I wanted to try to be careful because, like, any information can be very, very revealing. And there were people who were generous enough to spoiler tag their answers, or their general, like, hints which they were giving out. But there was a couple of posts which just weren't spoiler tagged in any capacity, basically. And at the time, I couldn't really make sense of them, but after enough, like, just looking around the thread, like, still trying to be careful not to click spoilers for the third riddle especially, eventually I still ended up reading enough in terms of unspoiler tagged hints that I figured out something. And the specific lead which I was provided with, again, this is purely on me for actually checking the forums. The other thing I could have done was check the level code, but honestly, I think I'm actually glad that I took just the actual hint instead of looking at the level code this time. Was that apparently the third riddle was not meant to be in terms of symmetries, but rather in terms of groups of 6. And that was very bizarre to me. Like, what is the difference? Like, why would you want to focus on it in terms of groups of 6? And that eventually led me to, like, just take another screenshot of the level and really just scrutinize it, like, I already know where the symmetries are. I'll hover my mouse over them. So there's this point of symmetry, and then there's another one here. And then I think there's another one over here, small as it may be. And again, it didn't seem like much stood out to me. But then when I took that hint in mind, looking at it in terms of groups of 6, I eventually realized that there was actually something at play here. If you ignore the first one, and you just look at this group of 6, and then you look at the group of 6 under it, you'll notice that this one maps onto this one, the second one maps onto the second to last one, the third one maps onto the third to last one, and so on and so forth. So this set of 6 is a mirror of this set of 6. And I was like, alright, maybe I can extrapolate on that somehow. So I was like, maybe this set of 6 is a mirror of this set of 6. It doesn't make sense why there's this first column, but I might as well do it. And it was like, alright, maybe hypothetically that is something. And it still made sense in and of itself, because like this is the point of symmetry, so like setting this as the mirror of this still made sense in terms of the overall symmetry viewpoint as well. And at some point while doing that and focusing on this left row, I realized that this group of 6 and this group of 6 were also mirrors of each other. And at that point, I think it just sort of clicked what this puzzle was asking of me. Or I guess I should call it a riddle, not a puzzle. But I booted up a screenshot, which I took of the game in that attempt. Not the same attempt as this, but in an attempt when I was just trying out the level on my own. And I think the image here speaks for itself, basically. Like, we've got one rectangle here, another here, basically showing off all the different groups of 6, or groups of 6, I guess, and using those to like fill in the missing information. And the thing about doing this is that it did make sense. Like, conceptually at least, this was a reasonable way to extend this pattern, but that leaves out this last one here, which seemingly doesn't have any meaningful way to derive it, because you would need another one. Like, you need it to be a given, because it's out of range of all these other extensions of the pattern. But it's not given, so as far as I can tell, it would just have to be one of 4 random values. And I went in, after I went and filled in the screenshot, and went back into the game, and I input all of these different guesses I had, I went and scrolled over to the right, and sure enough, the gate was open. So this thing we've got going on here is apparently actually the solution to the puzzle. And let's go back into the game now. There's not any reason to linger on the... Let me make sure everything all right? Okay, everything's all right. No reason to linger on the screenshot anymore. So let's do what we were doing here. So up, down, right, up, down, left. And then here we've got down, right, up, down, left, up, and then Up doesn't seem to be working. Right. Down apparently works. And just to show you, there's not really anything over here which would indicate that down is what's supposed to work there. But we're into this final little stretch here. Funny story, I actually fell off the edge twice after I tried to input my solution, which I had in the paint document. So I had to redo the level another time. But that is patterns finally finished after all this time. So my thoughts on this, I think, are comparable to my thoughts on, which one was it? Alien Glyphs 3. As you might recall, this was another level which mystified me for many play sessions, and I just never could figure anything out. And then once I had figured it out, it sort of felt like I was being misled the whole time. That's pretty much how I feel about this level too. Like, the first two patterns are cool. But the third one, it falls into a lot of the same traps, in my opinion. Like, there's not enough in terms of, like, focus, I guess. Like, there's too many variables at play, and too many different interpretations, which all have their own, like, sets of false leads. And ultimately only one of them is correct. And even then, like, I think you would reasonably be inclined to assume that a solution to this whole ordeal would involve something which is able to figure out every digit, including the last one. But apparently not in this case. Like, the top left and the bottom right switches here, they literally, like, don't matter. Like, they could be removed from this puzzle and it would still function perfectly as normal, just without the noise. Of course, now it makes sense why this was arranged in a grid. Like, the grid makes it a lot more obvious that you're supposed to look at it in terms of, like, vertically adjacent groups of 6. But similar to Alien Glyphs 3, I had no reason to believe that that was the case. Like, just one way or the other, that is. Like, because the symmetries implied that this was meant to be read in terms of a straight line. And I guess, funnily enough, the exact inverse was true, just like with Alien Glyphs 3, where I figured that the grid layout was actually supposed to be a hint to how you're supposed to read it, but it turned out in that case I was supposed to be just read in reading order. So, funny how those two sort of things just sort of pair up with each other. But, yeah, ultimately, in closing, my thoughts on this level, it's alright. The first riddle was neat, the second riddle was neat, the third riddle needed better hints. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of ways you could do it. I think what I would personally go for is, like, maybe something with the floors encasing the hint boxes and the inputs. Like, using, like, different colors of floor to indicate the different groupings which you're supposed to be interpreting them in. Like, for this set of 6 and this set of 6, you can maybe paint these all blue, and then for this set of 6 and this set of 6, you could paint everything in this region red, and then for the overlaps, you could do, like, magenta. Something like that, just to convey how you're supposed to read this. And again, like, this first element is extraneous, and this last element is literally, like, not solvable, so why even include it in the first place, other than to imply that this pattern could go on forever, quote-unquote, when really, like, what this actually just reveals is that this pattern requires random generation in order to continue, because you're always going to have to fill in one blank in order to continue the pattern in every step. And it's just going to be random what that blank is, so I'd be hard-pressed to call this a pattern at all, really. But, again, it's a neat concept. I can't get mad at the concept. I'm just mad at the execution, but even then I've sort of mellowed out about it. So that's patterns done. Let's give it a rating. So I think I'm just going to give it a 5 flat. If it was just the first 2 riddles, I'd probably give it like a 7 or an 8, but the last riddle really bogged down my experience, and also single-handedly killed this Let's Play for a solid month. So I think that's a fitting rating to give it. Because again, it's not a bad level, it's just an unfortunate level. But that's patterns done. Let's talk about the future of this Let's Play. So up next, we've got Enigma 3. And I would like to get around to this eventually. I don't think I want to get around to it today. Just because I'd like to have a more proper fresh start of sorts than like just bridging directly from 2 into 3. But I do have plans to get around to this eventually. Of course, I've got my own personal endeavors, lots of game making projects and such, which might distract from this. So if I end up taking longer than you'd want to get around to Enigma 3, then that's just going to be the way it is. But just rest assured that I'm not ending the series just yet. Like, it would take, I think, in order to properly, like, get me, like, away from this game forever, you'd have to have, like, 10 of levels like this in a row to just, like, completely kill all of my motivation to actually try to approach the game on its own terms. Because I'd like to avoid using hints when necessary. Like, it's only really a last resort, because I do want to understand the puzzles ultimately. Like, that is my mission statement for this Let's Play, is to understand the levels, even if I can't beat them. But I have a very high threshold of tolerance for how much work I can put into these levels before I get burned out on them. And that sometimes leads to several days of wait. But enough of that. So let's go over the stuff that we ended up not touching on over the course of Enigma 2. So snowing, of course. This one sucks. Like, I think, like, easy mode or not, this one is just a luck festival. And again, I've said my whole piece about it. I think there's 10 billion different things you could change about the level to make it not what it is. But ultimately, it is what it is. Then we've got the different Pentomino levels, 2 through 5. These ones, again, I think I'm just not interested in solving Pentominos, because there's not really, as far as I can tell, there's no, like, logical groundwork for solving Pentominos. Like, there are some puzzles in the Pentomino level pack, which I was actually interested in attempting, because I noticed that they had, like, specifically only one solution. Let me scroll up real quick and find the one I'm thinking of, because I remember giving it a look. Is it this one? No. It's one of these. It's this one. So yeah, as you can see, one solution. This one was neat. I didn't solve it, but sure enough, there's a lot of different constraints you can place on which pieces have to go where. Things like it's all of the different holes and narrow passages and corners specifically. I think you're only allowed to place the P piece, like the 2x2 with an extra bit on the end, and these two regions in the corners, for instance. So there was a lot of neat constraints you could place, but I'm not sure if there was anything that you could reasonably there were still bifurcations, which I wasn't really sure how to resolve, which meant, ultimately I would need to test a lot of configurations still before I got something which just happened to, luck into a solution. So yeah, I don't think pentominoes are the puzzles for me. There is one other thing here. This level, you might remember, which I spent forever and a half on. I wanted to get the part-time on this, but I'll be honest, my motivation to return to this level has just completely run dry. I don't want to learn how to solve this. I already gave, the sort of, deconstruction of it in a web browser a good hour or so, but I wasn't able to solve it even then. And I think I just completely lucked into my weird, doohickey, which somehow managed to cover all the bases, with every single piece other than the last one being completely out of place. But that's that level. So 95% solved. For Enigma 2, I'd say that's pretty good. Maybe one day I'll clear these. Maybe one day I'll get all the part-times. Or maybe not. But that is Enigma 2. So, on to greener pastures. And next time for Enigma 3. See you next time.